Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today, I have another special guest. I have Patsy Rahn with me. Now, Patsy played the role of Betsy Randolph in the episode The Silver Wings. And recently, Betsy had seen the segment I did about the Silver Wings, and she reached out to me to share some of her memories about that episode. So I asked her if she would come on and share those same stories with all of you. So please welcome my very special guest, Patsy Rahn. Welcome, Patsy. It is so exciting to have you here. I'm so glad you reached out to me and that you agreed to come and talk with me and all of our long-standing, loyal viewers of the Waltons. They so love the show and follow faithfully every episode and the characters. So I know they will be very thrilled to see you here. Of course, for those of you out there, Patsy Rahn played Betsy Randolph in the episode The Silver Wings. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a treat to be here and nice to meet you. It's been a long time. So when I talk about this show, I think it was 43 years ago. So that's a long time.
Yeah. People ask me questions, and I think sometimes they're a little surprised that I don't remember all the details. I keep reminding them the early episodes were 50 years ago for me, and I was only 14. So what I remember for Cammie in particular, the youngest, she said, I was like 7. What do I remember? But she remembers a lot. So it is kind of fun to go strolling back down memory lane. And then it's interesting to me to have some of the fabulous actors who came to guest with us to talk about, because you just did the one episode, so you might remember details that to me are like, which episode, which year, a blur.
No, it was very interesting. And I when I saw your program on YouTube and it was said Silver Wings, so I watched it and I thought, oh my gosh, you were talking a little bit about that airplane thing you'd heard about, but you weren't sure if it had really happened or what had happened. So I said, I've got to write her. I've got to tell her all about this. It was actually quite an event. So shall I start the story?
Yeah. You were out in Fraser Park, I'm guessing, shooting that.
We weren't in a park.
But I mean the mountains up near Bakersfield, Gorman area.
Sort of hills outside LA.
Yeah.
And the area, it was almost like we were on top of a plateau and then it drops off. You can't see what's down here. So, and where I was shooting was right about here. That's where the plane was and where I was standing, right about here. So when I first got there, it was a nice setup. And I noticed that they had fire trucks and an ambulance there. And I thought about that and said, okay, that makes sense. It's safety measures. So when we started doing the plane scenes, the first one, which you do see when Jim Bob gets into the plane, that's the real plane and the engine is going. And I give him my scarf, and wish him well before he goes up for the first time in the plane. And there's a shot of me. I haven't seen it in a while. And I'm getting sandblasted by the airplane, right? But I'm going, And then I think they move the plane a bit, but they don't go off the ground. And then for the next shot, they had the cameraman sit in the seat where Jim Bob had been sitting, right? And the pilot's up here. So they take off. And the point of this was to get Jim Bob's view of looking at me at the ground. And supposedly he's waving at me and I'm waving back at him. So the cameraman has the camera and he's sort of aiming it down to the ground and they take off and they turn around and they're coming back. And so I'm waving. You can see some of these shots are actually from that camera moment, right? So they fly by and then from my memory, they were supposed to do a loop above me and then fly back the way they came. So I was waving. They flew up and I was about to turn to wave again. And I realized it was totally silent, that the plane engines had stopped. And I thought, that plane is above my head and there's no engine going on. And I said, keep waving. I don't know what's going on. And the pilot was brilliant because the engine had somehow just died. he glided it out of whatever formation he was in and started gliding it back out this way, but lowering it gently as he went. Obviously, he wanted to land it, but there wasn't enough space to land. So we watched as he got lower and lower and lower, and then they just disappeared. They just went out of sight, and it was so scary. And the ambulances took off, and the fire trucks took off, and the tech people went running. And thankfully, they were fine. There was no explosion. Nothing horrible happened, but it was very, very scary. Everybody was very shaken up by that. It was pretty amazing. And when we got back to the set, when we got back to the studio for some more shootings that afternoon, I was amazed to see the cameraman was even still there and we were going to keep going. I mean, it was that kind of a shakeup, you know, people were really affected by it. And he said, yeah, you know, it was really unnerving and everything, but he has to keep going, you know, has to keep working, and that will help him. But it was an unforgettable experience doing that.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. I do. What I remembered was, because I wasn't on that location, because it was just you and David were the only actors in that sequence. Gene Talvin, the camera operator, that we heard rumors about this plane crash, and Gene came back and he just told this story about it sort of skidding along the ground, and literally his feet. He said he was really, really glad he was wearing very thick rubber-soled shoes, because he could feel the heat of like skidding across the ground. I don't know whether the wheels didn't engage or because of what, but it was probably a biplane is my recollection.
The double wing.
And typically with those, the pilot is in the back. I did a little wing walking stunt for Circus of the Stars at one point. And so we flew aerobatics in a biplane. And I know with certain maneuvers, when you would get to the peak of a maneuver, the engine would stall. It was whether they intentionally stalled it or it just happened. But then, because I remember doing these things where we'd go straight up, and then at the top it would be silence, and then I would feel and they did this one where then you start sliding back and it's sort of silent, and all of a sudden I see smoke. You know, the engine, they were trailing smoke. I'd start seeing the smoke, and then the engine would re-engage and they'd dive. So whether it was supposed to happen that way, whether it's somebody in the audience needs to let us know who's a pilot. Let us know what the general situation is. If you're doing a loop, does the engine cut? I remember doing loops, but I don't remember. I remember being weightless at the peak of those loops, but I don't remember if the engine always cut in loops. So perhaps it was meant to, but then it didn't re-engage.
It didn't come back in.
But oh my goodness.
So he was obviously a very, very good pilot. You know, he knew he had to just, I don't know, again, what happened to the wheels, et cetera, because we couldn't see what happened. We couldn't see how they actually stopped. But so that was an amazing experience.
Well, thank goodness no one was really hurt. So beyond the harrowing experience of the airplane, what else do you remember about doing the episode? Do you remember the casting process, how it came about?
Sure. Well, as usual, you have an agent, and the agent keeps their eye out for parts that you might be right for. And then if they feel one is right for you, they usually send out your video, your VHS, or whatever it was at that point. And they could look at it and then say, yes, you know, let's make an appointment, bring her in. So I got an appointment. I think I knew ahead of time that David was going to be there. I'm pretty sure I was aware of that. So when I walked in the door, there were a lot of people in there. I think the producers were in there. David was in there. And I think maybe his parents were in there as well, because he was underage. But anyway, that's my memory. David might have a different one, or somebody else might have something to correct that if that's not right. But there were a lot of people there. And I think they had me read a little bit first from just as Betsy, just to sort of hear me, see me a little bit. And then they had David come up and the two of us read a scene together. And that was the audition. They wanted to see how we worked together. And it was very comfortable. David was just like he is on the show. He was charming. He was sweet. It was just very easy, very comfortable. And at the end of the scene, you could just feel everybody relax, and they were smiling, and you knew it was right. The whole room kind of felt it was right. So it's rare, but it's one of those rare times when before I left that room, I pretty well knew I had it. And that doesn't happen very often as an actor,
Right.
But yeah, it felt really good. And and the shooting, it felt really good. It was interesting because I didn't really work with anybody else from the cast. It was really, the scenes were just with David. And the costumes, everybody talks about the wardrobe, right?
Yes, as did I.
Yeah, so did I. So I didn't even see my costumes before I had to wear them. So this was like,
So you didn't have a wardrobe fitting, which usually happens.
Well, if I did, they weren't all there because I did not try on those blue jeans. But I think the halter top was actually my own halter top. And then the shorts, everything else they provided. Now, I did check to see if during this time they would have worn kind of shorts and a halter, because that kind of made me go, I didn't expect that. And they said, yeah, that's possible. And if you think about it, folks, she's only wearing that when she is alone in the cabin, right? True. She's not like wearing it into town or anything. So she's trying to be comfortable. It's summer. She's keeping cool. And I love the dresses, and the hair they did for the dinner scene was lovely. I mean, I thought they did a very nice job. The one thing for me that I just could never quite figure out is there's one short scene, I think it wasn't cut out, but we're gardening. I'm gardening. I'm putting some plants into the ground, and I'm kind of kneeling down, and I'm wearing these blue jeans that were so tight on me, I could barely breathe. And it's like, first of all, I don't think blue jeans were worn like that at that point, but I certainly didn't try them on in a wardrobe fitting. But all in all, things like that, once you're performing, it doesn't exist. It's not there anymore. So you're where you are, you're who you are, you're in that place, you're in that time. So it's all fine. But I know people are really, caught by the shorts and by the clothes. But in other moments she does wear the dresses when she goes out for the airplane, when there's dinner, when she's leaving, when she goes to talk to him in town. So it was a wonderful show to do. I mean, it was one of my favorite jobs. Right away from the audition all the way through, it was just comfortable. People were wonderful, easy. There was no discomfort at all in doing that production. It was really, really, really nice.
Oh, that's good. Always good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, because as you said, you didn't really, there was a scene where you came to the house to talk to Jim Bob, and I think you had a brief conversation with John, with the father, when you were looking for Jim Bob. And I think he had a few words with you or something about being.
You remember more than I do.
Well, because I watched the episode. In order to talk about the episode, I watched it again, which is the only reason I remember anything about it. So I seem to remember that, but I don't think any of the rest of us were around, which is always interesting because we have so many wonderful guests that we sometimes don't even meet. Because all of your scenes were predominantly at that cabin.
Yeah.
Which means probably whole days where I had the day off.
I wasn't even at the studio those days. I mean, that was some location, so.
Really? Where the cabin was? I know the airplane.
I mean, it wasn't at the town. It wasn't at the town set. It was at the cabin set.
Right.
So it was in a different location. But it was a nice, the whole thing I thought was very nicely done. And the car ride, and singing the song was great fun. It was a lovely show to do. It was just a lot of fun.
That's cool. Had you seen had you watched the series? We were into about our 9th season, so were you familiar with the series?
I had watched it, I think, early on in the series, but I was busy and I rarely watched television, believe it or not, when I was working in theater first and then in television a lot. But I didn't watch very much later on, but I was aware. I did like it. When I heard it was the Waltons, I went, oh, lucky me, and then I read the script and I thought, this is nice. This is a very nice role. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really about you,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then here we are, as you said, we're about 43 years after the fact. And how does that seem to you then, for us, it's amazing to have this show that is still on and just seems to keep building its following, and we had no idea, but it really has become an amazing legacy, and you are part of that that legacy. How is that for you, who just kind of came in and did this amazing episode, and all these years later? Yeah.
I am very happy. I'm very glad that I got a chance to do it, because I agree there's something very special about the show, and there is something kind of a legacy about it, and it's one of those shows that will always be around somehow. I still get tiny amounts of residuals for that show re-airing. So,
buy a cup of coffee.
Yeah, buy a cup of coffee. But it's a nice little reminder,
Yeah. But so you had already, obviously, you had a fairly extensive acting resume before you came to the show. Tell us a little bit about that. I don't know that the audience knows anything particularly about you.
Oh, okay.
Before.
Well, my acting career is a long time ago. I sort of feel like I've had several episodes of my life, and that was certainly a wonderful period of time for me. I started out, first of all, I trained as a ballet dancer. So that was my background. And I was at the National Ballet School in Toronto at the end when I decided to stop my dance career. And I went into a theater company in Toronto. And so it was an equity company. So I started making my living at 18 doing theater in Toronto. So I kept working in Toronto. One of the shows went off Broadway. I went with a show that was really wonderful. And then at some point I decided I wanted to move to LA, give that a go. So I moved down to LA, and I was fortunate when I was up in Canada. I did a show called Police Surgeon. And there was the lead they brought up from the US, who I think was Canadian, but I can't remember his name 50 years later, but he was a wonderful person, and he really liked working with me. He liked me as an actress, and he said, he said, are you going to LA? I said, yes, I am. And he said, come have dinner with my wife and me. I want to talk to you about being in LA. So I went, and we had this lovely dinner, and they showed me their stone collection, and we talked about everything. And then he gave me a letter of recommendation to an agent. And that was huge, because one of the hardest things when you go to LA is to get an agent. I mean, I knew a lot of actors that went and then had a horrible time getting work because they couldn't get an agent. And I already had a tape of my work. So that was huge. So I was lucky. I got the letter of introduction, and I went and met this person, met me, and he said, okay, I think I know who you could be with as an agent. He calls them, So I had a helping hand to get into the business. And then it was just, going to auditions, see what happens, have a job, wait a couple of months, get another job, wait some more months. And that's sort of how it goes. So when I started not getting the type of work I wanted to get anymore, a couple things happened. I'd always been writing. That's always been a second thing for me, even when I was acting. And I began to feel, I thought all these years I've been saying words written by somebody else, right? Somebody, and it's a different character. It's not me. So I've been going into somebody else as a character and saying the words that somebody else wrote. And I really felt, okay, it's time for me to get my own words out.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to write my own what I want to say out now. So I felt comfortable about making the decision because acting wise, I wasn't getting the roles I wanted. So it wasn't really satisfying. And I figured somehow I'll be able to make a living. I'll figure that out as I go. So I had at that point like three agents between Canada and LA and 5 unions between Canada and LA. And I just wrote them all that I'm retiring from the business. It strikes me as funny now, but yeah, I just made the decision, I'm going to move on, and kind of did a couple of different things for a couple of years, including I got a chance through a mutual friend to work with an artist named Sam Francis. He's a painter. Mm-hmm. If people don't know him, I recommend you look him up because you'll enjoy his work. He's a wonderful painter. He's since passed from cancer. But that was important. It gave me an insight and an experience into another aspect of being an artist. There are other worlds of being an artist than acting, right?
Right.
And this plopped me into the middle of sort of high-end artist world of a painter. And I like Sam very much, great person. So that was a wonderful experience. But at the end of it, people were encouraging me that I should do more than what I was doing. And I had dropped out of high school when I was younger and in my dancing years. So I decided to go back and do college.
Oh.
So I did, went to UCLA, got a political science degree, and then decided to go on for a master's in Chinese studies. Wow. So there was this whole process. That's what I mean about different episodes of my life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it's all been good. I've retired about 3 years ago, and I'm doing a lot of poetry readings with my poetry. And I got back into doing my photography more. I have an exhibit coming up, which is great. So I feel like I found other areas that I can be creative in. So I'm very grateful for that. And but a lot of good memories of the acting world and doing things. And the Waltons was one of the best. So great time.
If people would like to see your photography or hear about read your poetry, where would they go to do this?
I have 2 websites. One is for my work as a poet, and that's very simply my name, patsyrahn.com.
Okay.
And you can go there. And then the photography you could probably find it by Googling Patsy Rahn photography or photographer, but technically the title is Skillfully Curled Photography.com. And that's from an E.E. Cummings poem. So it's a bit of a play. But yeah, and they'll see my photography there. I have sort of 2 different periods, you might call it, of photography. This exhibit is called Magic in the Mundane. So it's about taking a look at the most mundane objects like grass, something that is just, you don't even think about, right? Mm-hmm. And it's capturing it in a moment that when you look at the photo, grass is no longer just something you ignore. It's something, wow. It's like there's magic all around us, even in the most mundane of things, right? And then recently I started doing what I'm calling the alchemy series. And I take a photo and then play with it. The other photos I don't mess with. I don't Photoshop them. I don't do anything. They're totally what was seen through the camera. But I've started playing with some of the photos, and they're really fun because I take a photo that by itself would be boring, and I play with it until it creates an entirely new image. I mean, totally different. I'd have to tell you what it was previously. And they're a lot of fun. They're harder to do and they take more time, but I'm hoping for my next exhibit to do an exhibit of these pieces because they're very different. They're very abstract and a very different type of thing. So I'm having fun. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. So I really want to thank you, Patsy, for coming and joining me today and sharing your story of being on the Waltons and your life beyond the Waltons.
Well, thank you, Judy. This has been fun, and I appreciate the invitation. So thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
All right.
Pleasure. So make sure that you hop on and read all the lovely comments. So everybody has to leave lovely comments for Patsy and thank her for coming on. And if there's any other actors from the Waltons who want to reach out to me and come do a segment with me, just pop into the comments below and let me know that. I love having guests.
Thanks a lot. Bye, everybody.
I want to thank Patsy once again for coming to join me. It's been such a treat to have her to share about her time on the Waltons and her life. I will be back with more behind the scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.